Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting, my podcast. And I'm so excited. This year is the fourth year, March. I started the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I started the Facebook group first, and 4 years ago this month. And I can't believe it's been 4 years. And I just wanted to come in here and celebrate this milestone with you and talk about some recent things. I do have a couple of more women making herstory stories coming up this week. Just haven't gotten them published yet. So check out those, some really exciting women that I'm going to chat with. But today I just wanted to focus on the revelation that I've hosted this podcast for 4 years. It was the impetus was given to me by my friend Gina Carr, who's like, you need to start a community. You need to start a Facebook group. And with her pushing me, I did. So I started the Facebook group Eating at a Meeting. And actually I got the name from a guy who was a videographer who was filming me, and he was listening to me over and over again talk about eating at a meeting, what I actually never even said that, but just basically eating at a meeting, but all things food and beverage. And he's like, you're all things eating at a meeting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a great name. So that's how it came to be 4 years ago. And to be honest with you, I didn't tell anybody I started it. I was very nervous about it. I'm like, what am I going to do in a community? How am I going to do this? And it was 2 months later, actually in May, when we were in the heat of COVID. I mean, I started the Facebook group before COVID really was a thing. I didn't know, really wasn't paying too much attention to it, kind of a little bit. But when I got asked by MPI and MeetingsNet and North Star Meetings Group and an exhibitor show to do some webinars on food safety and what food safety meant around COVID. And so it was in those podcasts or those webinars that I announced at the very end of it that I had a Facebook group. And oh my gosh, I was blown away. Like within 1 hour, I had 300 members, and I am over, I think I said 2,100. I have to go back and look at the number. It's been a revelation. I have all of these people that are 1,200 members in the Eating at a Meeting Facebook group. And I'm excited about it. It is a group that we just chat about and share different experiences with food and beverage. Majority of the people who are members are meeting planners, are meeting professionals, but there's other people who own companies in food and beverage, others who have dietary restrictions that belong to it and want to learn about how to create better experiences with eating at a meeting. Let's see. I just got a message from somebody. I'm on. One of my favorite guests and listeners all the time, Nancy Sutter Burns. Thank you very much. I hope you are one of the people that is listening to me right now. Thank you very much. And here's a link to join the Facebook group. It's interesting to listen to everybody's different perspectives. And I have to give kudos also to Sue Pelletier, my good friend, who in that first month of March, who helped me interview 10 women for Women's History Month. And it was before COVID hit and everything. We interviewed 10 women that were doing fantastic things in food and beverage. And I have to thank her significantly for listening to those interviews and helping me with those interviews and chatting with those women. We were bawling at the end of some of those interviews. It was a dream come true in interviewing them. And I'm going to go pull those names up real quick, but they Thank you, Sue, for that. And then for everybody who's been a member and who has listened to me, Nancy, you are one of my favorite cheerleaders. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everything that you do to help push me forward and thinking through things. So let's see. I'm going to look at those women. But I know, and one of them that I interviewed that month, her Emily Brown, and she is actually, when I interviewed her, she was doing one thing and she left that and is doing another thing, which is amazing. And I'm going to be having her back on the show to honor what she's doing. But those women way back in 2020 were Leanne Mandelbaum from No Nut Traveler, who's been fantastic in promoting safe experiences eating on airplanes, and Tina Pina, who is making fertilizer out of food waste, Nina Curtis, who is a vegan chef and has cooked a vegan meal at the White House, Dr. Ruchi Gupta, who I got to see last week at the Food Allergy Summit. She is a food allergist and doing lots of research on food allergies and what that means for society globally and in the United States. Amelia Eckes, who does corporate dining and is all about making sure that there's inclusive experiences there. Amy Friends, who she and her husband had owned a restaurant that was providing safe experiences for other people. Stephanie Norton, who's a farmer. Mary Vargas, who is an attorney fighting for the rights of people with food allergies and other disabilities. Hillel Echo Hawk, who is an Indigenous chef and educating people on Indigenous foodways. And then finally, Emily Brown, who is the founder and CEO of Food Equality Initiative. And I'm excited to bring her back onto the show to talk about what she's doing now. But so that's enough, because I know that I celebrated all of those women again a couple of weeks ago for Women's History Month, Herstory Month, as I call it. But I also wanted to, I've been to an event and a couple of events in the last 2 weeks, and I wanted to just share some of my experiences there. Again, here's the link to join the Facebook group if you're watching. But so my most recent experience, I'm going to go backwards from most recent to last week, but I attended a networking event in my town, and it was a breakfast event. And a couple of things came from that experience. One, I was hesitant on what I was going to be able to eat. I know the restaurant and I was kind of hesitant. So I did bring something to eat with me to eat afterwards. But I went through the buffet and everything but 2 items, contained gluten, actually potentially 3. So I wasn't sure about the scrambled eggs. So I skipped the scrambled eggs, but it was French toast, scrambled eggs, bacon, grits, gravy, and biscuits and gravy. So I took some bacon and I took some grits, but I asked the waitress about the grits and I said, "Can you tell me what's in these grits?" And she's like, "Oh, well, it's a secret recipe. We don't tell anybody." And I'm like, "Well, for allergen reasons, I really want to know what's in it so I can know if I can eat it or not." And she's like, "Again, it's a secret recipe and they don't share it with us. They don't tell us anything." And I was just kind of very deflated by that conversation. And I'm just like, wow. And then, so that was internally in me thinking that and doing that. But I was also sitting at a table with 3 other women and they were asking what I do. And I said, "I'm a food and beverage consultant." And they said, what does that mean? And I said, "Well, I help people, meeting planners, venues, restaurants, catering companies, food service companies, not kill or offend people with the food that they serve. And so that they're serving inclusive experiences, food and beverage experiences." And she looked at me and she's like, "Well, we really need some help because I'm Jewish and I can barely eat at anything that's served at events in this town." And because she's like, they throw bacon on everything, or gave a couple of other examples. And one included going to a banquet. And that banquet, the main dish was a pork chop. And they had no other dishes to serve her as an alternative. And she didn't mention anybody else that she knew from that event in the same predicament, but she mentioned that. And she's like, I forgot to hit go live on Instagram. So there we are now. But so I just thought that was really interesting to get that perspective from her just by just saying, I help people not kill or offend people with the food they serve. And then we chatted about some other things. And then I was chatting with another lady, and she's like, are you the woman that mentioned when you stood up, you mentioned that you do inclusive food and beverage? And I said, yeah. And she's like, well, I understand that. She said, we have a lot of dietary food allergies in my family, and I can't eat gluten and I can't do this. And she's like, so thank you very much for what you're doing. So I was like, wow, thanks. So it was great. It was two people in that event that just resonated with what I had said, either sitting down in conversation with them or standing up and sharing, because that was the first time I had been to that event. But that second woman, I went to her office. She has a co-working space, and I went to check that out. And when I went to talk to her office manager for that space, I shared with her my experience that morning with eating, and she, come to find out, used to manage different food and beverage experiences or food and beverage venues in town. And I want to say hello to Irene Moore and What's for Din Din on Instagram. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, let me know. Writing, thanks for joining. And so she shared to me, this woman shared with me that being a manager and understanding the front and the back of the house of restaurants, she's like, it doesn't surprise her, for one, but two, she's like, when waiters go back to the kitchen and ask questions like the one that I ask, hey, do you know what's in these grits? They are usually, and depending on the restaurant, they are usually basically a hand is put up in front of them and saying, by the chef or the cook, saying, don't ask me that. I'm too busy. I don't have time to answer that. And basically yelled at. And she said, and so when they get yelled at by one of their coworkers, it's very demeaning. And so they come back out of that kitchen to the front of the house to the servers with not a good attitude and not a good, hey, like, well, I'm sorry, I don't know that. Or they're not really ready to answer those questions and help with that experience. And so I really thought it was telling, and I'm going to actually have her on the show in a couple of weeks, but I thought it was really telling because it's experiences that I have kind of seen, and I've said these before in other podcast episodes, is that I've met chefs that say, well, I cook the food, I don't have to label it, or I told them what I was serving. And then also on the other end, I've gotten banquet captains and servers are like, well, I don't cook. How would I know that? Or I don't know. Or what am I supposed to do with this meal card? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, right? To me, I've seen, and she reiterated the fact that there's a huge disconnect in the front of the house and the back of the house. And there's not a community or there's not a culture of, hey, we're in this together. We're serving these people together. And I think there needs to be a great culture shift in the food and beverage industry who are on the serving side, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a school or university, or whether it's a catering company or a venue. The front of the house staff are the people who are serving your food. You made this food. You're very proud of this food, but the front of the house people, staff, your coworkers are the ones serving it. And they're your ambassadors for that food. So the more they know about that food, the more they enjoy your food, the more that they can explain to people what's in it or how it's prepared or where it came from, how it was sourced, the better off you are as a chef or a cook or a restaurant owner, because they are your ambassadors. Your chef's not coming out and talking to people because they are busy. But we have to really bridge that gap and build a community between the front of the house and the back of the house. And I did talk to you about this back at IMEX with Tori from MGM too. She's the vice president of catering and convention services for MGM International. And so she's a convention services manager. So she's kind of that front of that. She takes it from the salesperson and she helps execute it. And so in charge of operations in that. And she even mentioned it. She's like, we have to bridge that gap. And I thought it was really telling, and it really kind of broke my heart too, in the fact that just by asking a question, hey, does this have wheat in it? Or does this have milk in it? Or whatever the question is, that somebody is berated for trying to then turn around and help a customer, a client, eat safely and potentially not die. And so I want to throw that in here. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I have the Eating at a Meeting Facebook group. And that's why I have the Eating at a Meeting podcast, and why I do all my speeches across the country, across the globe, right? Because we're in food and beverage, and food and beverage is supposed to bring us together. When we sit down and we break bread together, we build and we foster relationships, and when we grow businesses and we develop new friends and new avenue streams. And so it really does break my heart that there are such disconnect and such kind of hate for just one side of the kitchen door. I'm like, open the kitchen door. Let everybody share the kitchen door. Learn, bring them in, show them how to make those pastries, show them how you make your chicken cordon bleu or whatever it is, right? But we need to start creating menus and meals that meet different dietary restrictions and help our employees do their job successfully, so they feel empowered, so that they feel welcome and loved by their employer. You're paying them. Why not pay them to do their job well? And why not give them the tools to do their job well? And which reminded me of a Instagram post I saw yesterday, or no, actually or maybe it was a Facebook post. My friend Jamie, she posted today. Let me see what it said. And it's actually kind of relevant to this too. If I can see, how do you look at Facebook stories? View story. There we go. She said, quote, "This is from Big Little Feelings. When we criticize our kids or say harsh things when we're upset with them, they don't stop loving us. They stop loving themselves." And I really think that's important when we're thinking about our coworkers and our employees. When we criticize them, when we say harsh things to them, saying, "Hey, I don't have time for you. I'm not going to answer that question," which is coming from a customer, you demean those employees. So how can we need to change that culture around that? So that's that. That's my soapbox on that. So that was my experience just yesterday here in my hometown. And then last week I was in Baltimore, or I was in University of Maryland. I was a speaker at turn that off, so it's not distracting me. I attended the FAIR, which is the Food Allergy Research and Education. So the FAIR and Manutrinfo Food Allergy Safety Summit, FASS. Oh my gosh, I was blown away. We got to tour James Madison, University of Maryland, and Georgetown's culinary dining programs for their students. And we also got to visit a local bakery who's free of the top 9 allergens. And I will get that name for you of what that company is. And I was just really blown away by what the universities are doing to help feed their students who have different dietary restrictions. They have actually separate sections, separate buffet stations, if I want to put it in event planning words, but separate buffet stations that are actually 100% dedicated for foods that are free of the top 9 allergens. And the equipment that they use in those areas they have purple handles on them. They actually have purple brushes, sweep brooms, that those brooms can only be used in that section. Only specific people are trained to cook in those sections and serve food from those sections. All of the food that is served in those allergen safe areas, it's not self-serve. It's scooped out and served by the food service person and then handed to that guest. And a couple of things that really resonated with me was that it's not just dedicated to the people with food allergies. Some of the people were saying that the athletes come there because they know it's a cleaner meal, not a lot of sauces and things like that on it. So it's open to everybody to eat from there because they want to be inclusive. And they also provide a lot of the information on the university apps so they can look at dining. We learned from a variety of different dietitians who work with the students on campus to understand what their needs are and how they communicate with the chefs And so they can eat in specific areas of the school or in specific dining halls. Some of them are trying to incorporate it into every one of their dining halls, but most of them have it in a specific dining hall for them to eat from, which is really kind of great. And the individuals, I was really impressed by the University of Maryland. Everybody that works in that section of the dining hall, they all wear purple chef coats, et cetera. So the students know to go to those chefs, those food service workers, culinarians to ask the questions, because they're the ones making the food. So they know how to answer the questions and what to do. They had in Georgetown, I remember, which their dining facilities, oh my gosh, all three of them are like hands down so much better than what I experienced in college. So different. It's of course 30 years later, but I was blown away by the different offerings and how they labeled their foods, et cetera. And they did have on I was going back to Georgetown, they did have up on the board across, they had if it was vegetarian, gluten-free, or vegan on there. But I got to talk directly to the dietitian and ask her questions about what was safe and what was not safe. So that was a really great experience. And then the other speakers at the event, I was actually on a panel with the Global Director of Food Safety for Marriott Hotels, along with his colleague Elaine, who does training at Marriott. And we talked about the importance of training. And it's not just learning it, listening to a video or listening to one speech. It has to be continuous learning so that we don't forget that information. And so that was one of the really valuable things that I learned too, is that even though I feel like I've been talking about this for 14 years now and on eating at a meeting for 4 years, is that the continuous repetition is important. And even though I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, it's really important to continue to educate and bring different perspectives into that narrative from that dietitian, from that food service worker, from that eater, whether it's somebody who has celiac or who eats kosher or somebody who has food allergies, getting those different perspectives and actually getting the perspectives of somebody who's visually impaired or utilizes a wheelchair. How do they get through your space? Thinking through all those things and getting the different perspectives was one of the really valuable things that I got from that conference last week as well. Lots of people very interested in learning more and helping guide. And I did find it interesting though. I had one chef who works at a university and she's like, I need to talk to you. She's like, when we do meetings, because university culinary teams are also catering for events on campus. They're not just catering towards the students. They're catering towards events on campus for the chancellors, for different groups, et cetera, people who rent out the space, et cetera. But she's like, I need to talk to you. She's like, when we have meetings, we don't really think about this part. We do it really well in our culinary in the student service section of the dining halls, but we don't do it well at events. And so it really is across the board. It's a challenge, and it's really how do we implement those things and what do we need? It was interesting to learn also about the stock epinephrine laws, which laws are still in effect or not still in effect, which laws, what states have the stock epinephrine laws and what the updates are to that. And then the updates to the food code as well. There are a few states that have adopted the 2022 FDA food code, but there are still states that are using the 2017 and even one from the 1900s. Back in like 1998. So learning those things was very important to understand where allergen labeling is going and currently is and where it is going. So I'm encouraged. I'm excited. I got some great ideas that I'm going to share. I still got to go through all my copious notes and share what I learned on that. But I just wanted to come on here today and say thank you. Thank you for being with me for the last 4 years. And thank you for being with me for the next 4 years. Oh my gosh, that'll hit me 500 podcast episodes. Wow. That would be crazy and exciting at the same time. This journey is continuing. Eating at a meeting is still a challenge for a lot of people. And I commend you for trying to make the efforts to feed them safely and make them feel like they have a seat at the table with something that's safe for them to eat. So thank you again for being here. And I will be back tomorrow at 12 o'clock with I'm going to get her right title real quick. Hang on a second. Cynthia is get the right title. She's from Las Vegas, and she is the executive director of food and beverage for the Resorts World Las Vegas. So that huge hotel resort that opened up in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, she is the executive director of food and beverage for the hotel. So I'm excited to chat with her tomorrow at 12 o'clock Eastern to learn what it takes to run the food and beverage at such a large event venue, and all the different restaurants, all the different catering, etc. So it'll be really interesting to help close out Women's History Month chatting with Cynthia. So tune in tomorrow for a special episode. And again, thank you so much for being here and being part of the Eating at a Meeting community. If you are not a member of the Facebook group, please join. It's free to join. Type in, share your thoughts, share your questions. You've got lots of people that will give input to you about feeding other people with dietary restrictions, challenges that they've had. And I always am prompting you with different questions to help you figure out and navigate how to be safe, sustainable, and inclusive. So until next time, stay safe and eat well.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.